Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Adventures in History, where we talk about history. Axer says hi. Hi, Axer. Are you by any chance you're probably in both streams? That's what's going on here. I see. He has to seek dinner. Ah, I gotcha. It makes sense. It is time for dinner. I got home, ate, prepped for stream, and have stream running in about 35 minutes. It has been a doozy of a day. I had to wake up at 5:30 and drive to a distant campus of my college. What's up, Cliff Alistair McCain? McLean, apologies. Cliff Alistair McLean. Welcome. How's it going? So I had to drive a long way. I did not have to fight my students, no. But I did have to sit in interviews all day. So I was on a hiring committee. One of the other campuses is in the process of hiring a new psychology instructor. So the dean asked me to be on the hiring committee, and I said yes. So that's where I was. But then I had to drive an hour and a half back, which was compounded by the fact that I was driving through a very large city. Well, let me pause. A large city for my state. And right at rush hour, because we walked out of the committee at 5 o'clock. And by the time I got to traffic, it was all of the fun. All of the fun. In 35 minutes within arriving at home, I usually accomplish : empty list. So let me say hello to everybody. Nick Slottle, good to see you. Fidelia with the summoning of the chunky horse. That's the first time I've ever seen that, and that's amazing. Uncle Bill, good to see you. Viper, good to see you. Tuna, what's up? Moose, good to see you. And if you wanted to pass along hello to Actor, that'd be great as well. Cliff, again, welcome in, and thank you so much for coming to hang out with us for the first time. Please feel free to ask questions, participate at whatever level you feel comfortable. We usually just kind of hang out for the first few minutes of stream so that everybody can show up, and then we'll get into some material here in not too long. Kyle, what's up? DCI Banks is here, and the Green Herring are here. It's not really the first time. Okay, well, so the first chatting then. That's okay. You're welcome to do the lurk thing if you need to. We've got plenty of people that just want to come hang out and listen, and that is A-okay. Absolutely good, absolutely fine. A lot of the students that do really well in my classes when I teach are the ones that just sit very quietly and pay good attention. So I have nothing against the lurkers. I lurk in other people's streams quite a bit myself when I don't feel as socially available, I guess is the right word for it. So, but welcome in. Okay, so 4 chunky horses minus 3 chunky horses equals 1 chunky horse. But we love all of them equal. What's up, Junk Collector? Sounds like you had a no good deed goes unpunished. No, actually, so this is potentially going to sound very odd. I had never been on a full-out hiring committee before. I had been on a hiring committee where it was an internal transition, where basically we just had to review a particular person's credentials and then vote should we allow this person to transfer within the college, yes or no. And in that, it was very sort of perfunctory, and I didn't necessarily feel like I got too terribly much out of that. But I had never been on a full hiring committee with outside people coming in, and I sort of appreciate knowing how things work. So when I got asked, I said, sure, I'm interested, and then I asked some questions about how things would work, and then when the dean filled me in, I was like, yeah, sure, absolutely. because I like knowing how other things in different parts of the campus work. Every little piece of information is a part of a larger tapestry of higher education, right? So I would almost always rather know than not know. Hiring people is very difficult, and we had a lot of good candidates. And it was actually very, very tough for me to try to figure out which ones were. Well, I'm not really supposed to talk about it, but anyway, it was difficult for me to rank them in an order that I would suggest. We had a lot of people that did really well and would be good in the position. So we were very lucky in that we were choosing from lots of people that were very qualified, that did very well in the interview. So it actually was harder. It would have been easier if some of the people were less skilled at what they did, actually. If we could have said, oh, clearly not this person and this person and this person, but there were a lot of people that were like, well, hey, that would be really good to put on the team. So can I pronounce Luddites as Eris would for the entire stream? I could, but I won't. I think that's probably the only one you're going to get out of me.
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus!
Hello.
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus. KP, thank you so much for that sub. Uncle Bill, did I say hello to you? Hello, Uncle Bill. I don't know if I did. I know I saw your name, and then I was like, I need to say hello to Uncle Bill, but I don't know if I said hello or not. If I did, that's because my brain is shot. If I didn't, also because my brain is shot, but at least I caught up with it, right? That sounds a lot like I've never done jury duty before. I wonder what it's like. I wouldn't actually mind doing jury duty if it were in a time that would not directly mess everything up. The first time I got selected for jury duty, I was about to sit my comprehensive exams and do my thesis defense for my first master's program, and couldn't really reorganize that or reschedule that because I was graduating 2 days after my defense. So I got out of it that time. And then the other time was right after COVID hit, when everything in school was going absolutely haywire. And I basically said, look, I don't even know what my job is going to look like right now, and it would be beneficial if I could get out of this one. And I understand that I've asked for the last one out a couple of years ago, but it was rough. Hire based on an arm wrestling competition. I feel like many of the arbitrary requirements for hiring are just there to make the list smaller, not for needed skills. There's potentially some of that, Tuna. Some of it is to narrow down the applicants. If you don't meet the very basic qualifications to be a college instructor, that by itself weeds out a lot of people, right? We actually did have quite a few applicants that applied for the job that didn't meet the necessary criteria for being a college instructor. There are things that the federal government says that you have to have, and one of the biggest ones of those is you've got to be accreditable. So if you don't meet the accreditation standards, the college has a very, very small number of provisionary certificates that it can submit as a way towards getting people accreditable. But, they don't really like using those. And they almost all, well, how do I say this? I have seen at institutions of higher learning, colleges and universities using temporary certificates as a way to get coaches into positions. And I'll just say that as a general statement. I'm not trying to get out of anything at the moment, Cape Geek. Also, hey, Cape. I was referring to the 2 times that I've been chosen for jury duty. The heel spurs of civic duty. Well, it got me both times, but... All right, so we are here to talk about the Luddites, and specifically, I felt like it would be important for us to understand exactly why these people got so mad, right? What makes somebody so mad that they take a sledgehammer to a power loom? Well, you know, there are things going on other than just, I hate technology, right? There are more jobs asking for only master's applicants that in no way require a job to perform the job. That's also fair.
I'm Spartacus.
DCI Banks. Holy moly.
I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus.
We're going to have some Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus.
If the universe is so big, why won't it fight me?
I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus. I'm
We're just going to do some more of these.
I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. Spartacus.
One more.
I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. Spartacus.
DCI Banks, thank you so much for 5 gift subs. That is an amazing gift. And Dolicophallus, Tommy, Tendarios, Cara Blue Tree, and Lord Hypno, please do enjoy the gifted sub from DCI Banks and use the emotes to your heart's content. Thank you so much, DCI Banks. Appreciate it. The Power Loom deserves it. You were sleeping in my office today and you got woken up to a knock at your door and your boss offering you a pay rise. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. I hope that you didn't get in trouble for sleeping in your office. And you should by no means feel like you should have to spend your pay rise giving out gift subs in the chat, though they are appreciated. Where does the sun go at night? It's still there. We just can't see it. It's sneaky. It goes into lurk mode. You always suspected that DCI Banks was Spartacus. It's fair. It's a fair cop. Rethius, good to see you. Schmonite, welcome in. Good to see you. I am not Spartacus. Kill some other dude, please. That's also fair. Let's not forget that Spartacus ended up crucified, right? Dang, you should try napping more, right, Unreal Brian? I cannot endorse napping as a tried or proven method to getting a pay rise at work. Also, Tad, good to see you, my friend. Hope you're having a good one as well. You're on call at the moment, so it's all good. Okay, cool. Okay, I understand that too, being in IT world where you just sort of have to sit there and wait and sleep when you can get it. I have been there before. Nothing like getting a text message at 2 o'clock in the morning going, hey, the servers are down, and you're the closest one to campus. So you could just say that you were inspired by Japanese work culture. That's a fair statement as well. They do actually kind of honor sleeping, but it's more like you work so hard that you fell asleep, not necessarily that you were just taking a nap. That made me a picture of a tiny ant climbing to the top of the... Yeah, fight me. You would fight the ant and honor it. Napping at work is a power play. I power nap during my lunch break some days. I have talked about that before, but I don't usually leave my office during lunch, which I know is a problem all of its own. And I've heard it from my wife and KP and my colleagues that I should actually take a lunch break. I usually don't. I usually just kind of work through it, which has its own issues, I'm aware. I dated a doctor for a while, so you're familiar with the nights that she was on call. Yep, that'll do it. That'll do it. You're working in a role for some OSINT requirements. If people need emergency OSINT, there we go. There we go. I'm currently reaching over here to scratch the puppy, by the way. Not that I'm just like randomly waving my arm around. She's, well, you can't really see very much of her, but she's right here. Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? Well, you can't sit there because I can't scratch you. She like literally wants to sit right behind the chair. Hey, you come over here. Come over here. Come over here. There we go. Oh yes. Now we can get a shot of the puppy. There's the Kaylee. You want to come here? Oh yes. Oh yes. Hello. She woofed at me so loudly when I came in today because I had left very, very early this morning, and then I had come back late, and I had ignored the puppy all day because I was gone, and I got woofed at, and then I got a wooed. Are you going to forgive me? Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate the forgiveness. You big baby. Oh my goodness gracious. Oh yes. Oh yeah. Well, I mean, my wife works from home, so it's not like she's sitting in the house by herself with no entertainment or no human activity. I spread bacon grease on my face. No, I don't. She's just very affectionate, and if you ever came to visit and she got close enough to like know who you were, you would get all of the puppy sugars as well. That did kind of get me in my eyeball, though. All right, now let's actually talk about the Luddites, and we'll pick up. So again, who were these people? Why were they a group in the first place? And why do we remember them the way that we remember them? That's sort of the questions of the night. And to really understand this, we have to start with the discussion about textiles, which I know is a really hot and sexy topic, right? Everybody came in here to talk about thread counts, baby. Oh, yeah. So if we look at textiles specifically, and we look at what we would specifically refer to historically as something called the cottage industry. Cottage industry textiles. Tad's like, oh yeah. I support the thread. Count the thread. What's up, Tanker? How's it going? Show me those textiles. Indeed, right? I'll show you my thread count if you show me yours. Anyway, when we're talking about pre-industrial age textiles, we talk about what's called the cottage industry textiles. Now, these are basically fabrics made by hand. Now, when I say made by hand, I mean everything done by hand. And this is the way that it had been done for thousands of years. And it is a very small batch process, and it is a very slow process. And it starts with gathering fibers, which means you might be herding sheep, or it might, if you're in other parts of the world, in England it's mostly going to be sheep stuff. If you're in other parts of the world, different points in history, you're collecting flax to beat into fibers. So you get this big wad of fiber, and it's not even stringed yet, right? First, you have to clean it, because if it is wool from a sheep, it's going to have bugs in it, and mud, and probably sheep poop, and all sorts of not things that you want to rub around on your skin. So you've got to clean all this fiber out, which by itself is a labor-intensive process. Then you have to take all of that and spin it into thread, which, again, is usually done by hand. And in the ancient world, they didn't even have spinning wheels. Those are really only medieval inventions where you sort of have your big, your big needle bobbin sticking out and your big wheel that is going to basically feed these fibers in one at a time and twist them so that they form thread that you can spit out on the other end. And you're not done yet, because then if you want to dye that thread, now you have to dye it. And then you have to go into the process of weaving, which of course, again, is done manually by hand, which takes a long time. If you've ever looked at the number of threads, like if you're wearing a garment right now, just look at how many threads there are in your particular garment. And then imagine having to weave the garment that you're wearing and how long it would take you to make enough fabric through the process of weaving one thread at a time to make enough fabric for your garment. And then once you have the fabric, you don't even have a garment yet. You still have to go tailor it to make it actually fit like a shirt or a pair of pants or a tunic or a toga or whatever you're making. Cottage industry textiles is incredibly labor intensive. Again, it's a long, long process. This is also cost prohibitive, which means most people are not going to be able to afford a lot of this stuff. This is why in Much Ado About Nothing, if you are familiar with the Shakespeare play, when one of the brigands insults Dogberry, the master of the guard, he goes, "I am a man who owns 2 tunics." Because this was like a bragging right. Like, I have 2 shirts, gosh dang it. Right? It's almost like there's a reason that tunics and togas, right, because they didn't require very much tailoring. Most legendary weavers of all time, Polly and Esther. Well, it's certainly not Arachne. She was just so good, she got turned into a spider by the gods. They'd be so jealous of your shirt collection. They totally would. They absolutely would. Because these garments cost money. And you didn't get lots of clothes. Because think about it, and again, this is just sort of a thought exercise here. If I told you, okay, I want you to make me a shirt. And I gave you a giant stack of wool. All right? And I said, your job is to turn this wool into a shirt. Go. First off, how long would it take you to do that? How much work, how many hours of production would it take to go in that? Right? He must be a king. Exactly. How much would go into that? Like, think about how much it would actually cost if you were making a single shirt, right? We already knew Shane is close enough. Do I have a drop spindle or a spinning wheel or a loom? If you could make those, Nix, if you knew how to make those, sure. Can you make a crochet hook? Do you have the metallurgy skills to make one of those, or can you go procure one of those? So, sure. I mean, if you can make it, you can use it. But how much time would it take? And how much effort would it take? Right? This is a lot of work. Now, because it's a lot of work, an interesting tidbit. Let's see. An interesting tidbit, a 6,000-year-old shroud, 7 meters long and 2 meters wide, from a nobleman's burial cave in Israel. You saw this exhibit in person, and it was amazing stuff. Ooh, 6,000-year-old burial shroud. That does sound very, very cool. Let's see. Can I go... Nope, wrong. Nope, wrong. There we go. Sorry. Where's my zoom? 7 meters long and 2 meters wide. It's made from a single sheet of cloth. Holy crud. It's woven from linen yarn by the tabby weave, a basic weaving technique. This didn't use a loom. Edges of the cloth are decorated with bands incorporating brown and black threads to produce a sheet of cloth the size Oh, I guess it was a large loom. But a big team of 3 weavers. Okay. So I was going to say that's way big for a single loom. Which is noble bodies placed. The row of small holes discernible in each of the layers suggested that they were sewn together. That's pretty cool. Originally, natural color of linen is heavily stained by ochre and putrefaction. Oh, yeah, this is like, human remain juice. That is pretty cool, though. That's very, very large, and that would have probably cost lots. Lots. Wooden... I'm sorry, like wooden crochet needles. Yeah, there were those. So, cool stuff. Now, when we think of how all of this stuff works, this is probably a non-PC realization, but slave labor is starting to make a lot more sense. Well, I mean, if you look at the medieval world, a lot of the people that did this stuff weren't particularly very much more than slaves. If you were a weaver or something like that, you might have a little bit more freedom in life, but in some versions of medieval Europe and medieval Asia, skilled craftspeople were considered bargaining chips that could literally be traded amongst nobles. So if you were in debt to somebody and you couldn't pay it in cash, but you had a really skilled weaver, you might work out a way to trade your weaver to this other person's territory as a way to settle a debt, or as a way to pay something like a dowry. So that's like not much more than a slave, if we're really being honest about it. $1 US 6,000 years ago is that a billion? 100,000. Yeah, that's 2 billion. Holy crud. Well, there we go. That's kind of crazy. I don't know how much that holds up, but that's... I knew it would probably be a lot. I was going to say, like, that's a lot, but I don't know if it holds up, but okay. I don't do conversion rates. Yeah, I mean, I know, but you could compare it to something like coinage didn't exist 6,000 years ago. So, cities didn't exist 6,000 years ago. So this would be some sort of medium of exchange, right? Anyway, who are some people that decided we should make fabric cheaper? Well, how about a guy named John Kay? He is this guy. John Kay. Now, John Kay is an inventor and was particularly interested in trying to figure out how to make looms work faster. Looms, of course, are these big racks where you set up a whole bunch of string and it increases the speed of your weaving. But he is going to be an important inventor, and for some reason, my pictures are not doing what they're supposed to. Super de-duper. Give me just a second. All right. This is John Kay's invention, and it is called a flying shuttle. Let's make fabric cheaper and hats triangular. John Kay is a replicate name. Well, we know that K is a replicate name. I don't know, maybe John Kay is. But what are the purposes here of our flying shuttle? And what makes this so fancy? Well, a couple of things. First off, it has wheels. Now, I just realized that what I should have done is found a picture of a regular shuttle, which was basically just a big teardrop-shaped chunk of wood. And you sort of threw it between the threads. This, having metal ends, made it heavier, and these wheels made it move faster, so that as you are doing your weaving, you can sort of just flick it across the strings and it'll just scoot all the way across, and then you can hit your treadles and flick it back across. And this makes weaving much faster. John sounds like the sort of name a large language model would choose. Yeah, it's definitely going to go with ones that are more common in stuff, because that's what it's going to be pulling from. Also, hey Frank, big time. Looks like a leg of a pallet jack. Yeah, it sort of does, right? Just collapsed all the way. But the point here is this flying shuttle is going to increase the speed of weaving. Now, this by itself is a big invention, and it does change the game, right? When we talk about wide fabrics, like like the image that Cave shared with us, you're going to be able to do wider fabrics with one person on the loom instead of multiple people. So some of these looms that were really wide would require multiple people teams to move the shuttles through and to be able to, pack down the edges of the weave. When you run your line across, you have a bar that sort of comes down like this to pack the thread in tighter so that you have a tighter weave. But you would have 2 or 3 people working on that loom. Now, if we have a flying shuttle, one person can do these really long looms. So you've already cut 2 people's jobs out. Now, originally, that's not necessarily that big of a deal. He does this, by the way, in 1733, was when the flying shuttle is patented. So when we eliminate 2 people's jobs as a weaver, this isn't always going to create necessarily a really big glut of unemployment, right? The number of really big looms wasn't really that high. So a lot of these people just sort of transitioned into running looms of their own that were smaller, or running looms of their own that were larger, and the market was able to be a little bit elastic, right? So it expanded a little bit, and costs came down a little bit because things were a little bit more available. Now, let's remember that anytime that costs come down, this is potentially going to have an impact on how much money an individual person is making, right? Now, maybe they're making the same amount of money, it's just that they can produce enough that it comes out the same at the end of the day. But other times that's not necessarily the case. So, but cutting all those jobs will need the stockholders happy. Yeah. All right. So, John Kay did his thing. Now, moving along. By the time we get to 1764, we've got to the point where we're weaving faster. The choke point at that point is the thread. So in 1764, we get this invention. This is what's called a spinning jenny. Now, this is effectively going to be a multi-pronged spinning wheel. And you can see here that it has multiple bobbins of thread, and it's spinning multiple bobbins at the same time. Now, it's still being turned over here by a person, and it's still sort of manually operated, but it is dramatically increasing the amount of thread that can be produced. So if we're going to loom and weave faster, now we're going to be able to spin faster and get more thread to keep up with the looms. Okay, so we're changing again. Now, originally, the first patented spinning jenny could do about 8 spindles, but that's not going to really keep up with the demand. Just a few years later, we're going to see the invention of something that is really going to start changing the game. A guy named Richard Arkwright is going to work with John Kay, the guy that did the flying shuttle. And in 1769, he is going to invent... sorry, I should show you this guy. This is Richard Arkwright. You can make whatever obvious, noble joke that you would like to about him. If you said, hey, is this guy rich? Yeah, he's probably rich. Anyway, so this is James Arkwright, but this is his invention. And you're like, okay, what the devil is that? What's up, Lumpy? Good to see you. This is what's called a water frame. Now, the purpose of it being called a water frame is that it is water powered. So, whereas the spinning jenny was still something that needed to be, mechanically run or operated by a person, water frames don't. It runs on a water wheel. Water wheel turns with the course of the water, and it spins wheels and pulleys and etc. and it runs the water frame. Now you can see here this is a very, very early version of a water frame, and it's spinning just a few bobbins at a time. This is the first one patented. In only about 3 or 4 years, you're going to see water frames that are on, what we might consider sizable pieces of water, ones that can push a lot with the current, that are spinning 120 bobbins at a time. So what is this doing to our cottage industry? Well, you can get thread a lot easier, but we're still having the need for people to do the actual weaving. This is also increasing the demand for fiber, right? We need more product because we can spin thread so much faster. Also, with the water frame, because of the mechanical power that you're getting from the water, you can actually make much tighter thread. So the tighter you twist a thread when you're making it into the process of being spun, the more durable that thread is going to be, right? And you can then go on to make tighter weave with it, which is, of course, going to make your fabric more durable in the long run. So the water frame is going to almost immediately replace the spinning jenny as the preferred method of making thread. But at this point, now we have a different bottleneck. And the bottleneck has become humans. And this is when things start getting a little bit messy, because while the water frame is producing all this tons of thread, weavers are having a field day because they're being able to make more fabric. And they're just cranking out stuff on their looms like mad. But more people are being able to access clothing because as a weaver now has all of this time freed up from spinning thread on their own, well, now they're having all this time to make more fabric. But here's the kicker. When they're not spinning money, or when they're not spinning their own thread, they are having to spend their own money to buy thread from someone who is making it on a water frame. It is no longer going to be what you might consider economically viable for a person to spin their own thread, because the cost of a shirt that they would sell completely hand spun and completely handmade is now going to be significantly higher than what the rest of the market is doing. So if you don't have access to buy thread from one of these water frame people close by, you might have to order it from a distance. You might have to, work out some sort of deal where you can go into town and buy a whole bunch of this stuff. It's starting to have an economic pinch, and it's making a lot of people upset because we have more thread than we have fabric. Why can't people just make fabric faster? Well, you can probably guess where this is going, and the place where it's going is going to basically kick off here with a guy named Edmund Cartwright. This is Edmund Cartwright, and he is going to be the inventor of this thing. This is kind of brilliant. I actually was able to find the original picture from the actual patent where he submitted his patent for this particular item. The textile industry uses such weird terminology: shuttle, beater, heddles, bobbins, wefts. Yeah. You know this because you Googled it and you found a wiki, and now you just want to tweet this in Twitch to... Okay, what? I found it on wiki, and now I want to tweet this Twitch finding. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, this is really cool looking art. But anyway, what this is a power loom. It is a weaving machine that is run by mechanical power. And you can see here, it's pulling from all of these thread bobbins into our machine here that is running the shuttle back and forth and moving the treadles by itself. And what's the killer here for our cottage industry is the power loom is designed to run on the same sort of mechanical power that moves the water wheel. And when this happens, it's done. Because now we have mechanical processes that can make thread way faster and of higher quality than a human can do it. And we have a power... I see Thread GPT. That's pretty great. We have a power loom which can weave fabric at an incredibly high rate compared to what a human can do. Now, what's further? There's not even a need for one person to attend one power loom. And what this is going to do is going to replace the cottage industry with a factory industry. Because now all we really need to do is put our factory by a river and hire maybe 15 to 20 attendants who are each going to watch and maintain 5 to 10 power looms apiece. And this is going to replace thousands of weaver jobs, right? Loom tech actually evolved into computing tech. This is actually true. Because of the way that stitch counts work and the way that particular punch cards operated. One of the things that happened around this time when a power loom got turned on, another guy figured out that you could actually create a system with a punch card, which basically you'd get a big, usually sheet of metal or something like that, and you would poke holes in it for the needle to go into, and this could automatically weave patterns into fabric. So like if you wanted a plaid, or if you wanted a houndstooth fabric, or if you wanted a zigzag chevron pattern, you could feed these cards into the power loom and it would spit out this fabric with particular patterns in it. And that same sort of thread pattern stuff with punch cards was one of the original ways that computing ran way back in the day. You would feed a card into the computer and it would run calculations and stuff based on the punch card. So that's a great point, Noger. Also, hey, Noger, good to see you. What's up, Snowlock? Good to see you as well. Hope you're having a good one. Agni, how's it going? Good to see you. Lots of people coming in. Getting all the cool people in. I'm still waiting to see how the power loom creates the reavers. Your help with my paper was tremendous. You're finishing it up tonight right now. But the resources you provided were extremely useful. Well, Snowlock, I'm very happy for that. And I'm always glad to be of service. It's a cool thing to know that that all of that crazy random information that I learned isn't going to waste. And I'm glad that I was able to help you out. And I hope that you do well on the paper. You know about the punch cards from James Burke. There we go. Right. On a serious note, this is a very cool system for weaving patterns. Absolutely. I wonder if we'll ever stop hearing people tell me about punch cards. Hey, Tad, you know about punch cards? Have you ever been around somebody that was back working in computing in the old day, and you go, well, back in my day, we used to have punch cards. The last IT job that I had, there was a particular individual in the IT department, and I got to hear every time something went wrong, well, at least it's better than punch cards. And then I got to hear about Fortran, programming stuff in Fortran. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm glad that you were around in the 70s and 80s in computing. I wasn't even born then. That's cool. The question is, do you know the languages that we're using right now, or are you just trying to be, kind of persnickety about stuff? Because that's kind of the situation that we're in right now, right? Tad knows what I'm talking about. Right there with you, bud. My great aunt, now 92, wow, is a nun who got sent to the U.S. on a PhD in economics, and she programmed on punch cards a program to calculate if it would be profitable for a cafeteria to buy these new frozen meals. That's kind of cool, Lumpy. There you go. All right. Fortran wasn't that bad. I know of Fortran, and I know basically how it functioned. I could not write anything in Fortran. In the very early 80s, my mom had a programming class at a community college that still used punch cards. Nice. And then they got Apple IIs. Good computers, Apple IIs. There's a huge 19th century mill just down the road from me, and I know why it's beside a river. There you go. That's exactly why it was beside a river. Mechanical power. Now, of course, that does give way to steam power later on, and that's another part of the Industrial Revolution that we've talked about in other places. But with power looms and water frames, now the problem is we don't have enough fiber, because sheep can only grow so much wool. But this is interesting timeline-wise. If you've been around when we've talked about other particular topics, especially in the UK, like when we were talking about the Highland clearances, one of the reasons it was so profitable to stop farming in Scotland and to do sheep pasture. What am I trying to say here? Herding, right? Shepherding. One of the reasons it was so popular to transition from farming to shepherding is because it was just like there was this glut of production capacity, but no real fiber to put into the mix. But here we go. If you know who this guy is, Eli Whitney. This is Eli Whitney. Yes, Dame Karen. We are in the process of getting to the Luddites, and we're actually just about there. We are currently killing the cottage textile industry and driving lots of people out of work and into destitution. So we've got to do that before we can get to the reason why people are mad. All right, so this is Eli Whitney, and his most famous invention is this guy. This is the cotton gin. And a cotton gin is designed to pull the seeds out of a cotton boll. So you drop the cotton in, and these little teeth here and these combs will pull out the seeds from cotton. Now, prior to the cotton gin, that was done by hand, which was very labor intensive and kept your production down to how many people do you have slave laboring for you. Because cotton at this point, especially in the New World, was a crop that was grown in cash crop, slave, what you can call it whatever you want to. You can use chattel slavery, which is the technical term for it, but slave labor, right? How do I spell what? Cotton gin. Oh, cotton gin. Yeah, that thing. As far as school is concerned, you're pretty sure the only inventors we knew in the world are, yeah, Thomas Edison, who stole all of his stuff, George Washington Carver, and Eli Whitney, right? How do I request an episode? First off, you get on the list if you have 10,000 points. But you could also, at the end of stream today, we will be doing a vote, and you could suggest it then and hope that it gets chosen, which is cool. So there's a possibility as well. Now, yeah, and we talked about Eli Whitney a lot. So, what have we done? Well, with the cotton gin, we have made cotton a cash crop. This is the reason for King Cotton economic boom of the early 1800s. Cotton gin, by the way, is invented in 1793. So this has effectively eliminated all parts of the cottage industry now in the UK. And especially, this is having a big impact in sort of the middle part of England here. Now, I'll be using broad general terms, not specific British regional terms. So I don't want anybody to go, well, that's not the Midlands. I know. It's the middle part of the island. That's all that I'm saying here. I've already had people from the UK get angry at me because I said that this is the southern part of England. And they're like, that's not the South Island. I'm like, it's the southern part of the island. Anyway, right. The middle part of the island here, especially around regions like Derbyshire and Nottingham and Lancashire, these sort of middle territories here are where a lot of this textile production had been very popular. And the people in this region are hurting really, really badly at this point. You just learned about Condor tokens because apparently that bill issued them. Yep, that's cool too. And Rethius is now just trying to politic. The cotton gin was somehow involved in furthering slavery there. Yes, absolutely, Unreal Brian. So, cotton by itself, if you were growing it with slave labor, you weren't able to produce as much because a lot of the actual labor was involved in picking the cotton and then removing the seeds out of it by hand. And if you've ever picked something out of Velcro, right, like maybe a seed or something got stuck in some Velcro, and you're trying to pull it out of the Velcro, and you know how the fibers will stick to it, or if you've ever had to try to get a piece of gum out of somebody's hair, you know it just sort of sticks, and you kind of have to yank at it. That's how the seeds are inside of the cotton fibers. And you can't spin the cotton fibers until you pull the seeds out. So a lot of the labor that went into growing cotton was having slaves literally pick the seeds out by hand. And that was a very, very labor-intensive process, and you couldn't produce a lot. But when you have a machine that can pull that out automatically, then you only have to have one person minding the gin, and all of the other slaves can be out in the field picking and tending the cotton. So you free up a lot of slave labor to go out into the field and tend and weed and pick. So the ability to produce cotton grew exponentially, and because of these technological innovations like the power loom and our water frame, there was a very big demand for the fiber of cotton. So there was a really high demand, and with the cotton gin, you could create a larger supply, and that just fed into this sort of cotton mania, if that makes any sense. Unreal Brian, please feel free to go or ask follow-up questions, or help me figure all that stuff out, because I'd be happy to clear all that stuff up. You keep mixing up the word herding and hurting the sheep. Yeah, you don't hurt the sheep. You just herd them, right? Many of the plantations so originally the two biggest cash crops in early America were indigo and tobacco. And cotton was only grown in areas where it was too wet for those particular crops to grow, or areas where there were new people that were trying to get in on kind of a ground level, right? So there wasn't necessarily a huge market for it. Now, between the period of time where we have institution of some versions of automation, but not full automation, there was a growing market for cotton, and the incentive to grow cotton went up when people were going, we'll pay really well for this stuff. Some people were like, okay, look, well, if you're going to pay me this much for cotton and you can guarantee me this much money, there are ways where I can make it work on my plantation. So there were people growing cotton prior to what we might call the cotton boom. But the cotton gin was what really set the whole thing off, because you eliminated so many hours of slave labor as a production part, and you freed that up for the agricultural part. And it's rather remarkable. You can look at stuff like production numbers in 1793 when the cotton gin was invented, and then look at numbers even 4 or 5 years later, and your bar graph does that weird thing where it's like do 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 do, and then it just blows up because everybody wants to feed into this automated procedure now, because even the amount of production that they were making in the American South couldn't keep up with the automated versions of stuff in England. As much cotton as was being grown, they had not hit British capacity, because, it might take, this is all just sort of spitball numbers. I do not know this. This is just a hypothetical. But for every, I don't know, maybe 5 acres of cotton production for a year, that might keep one power loom busy for, a month or something like that. I don't know. But the amount of production never really caught up. Amount of cotton production never really caught up to the ability of the British market to expand to accommodate it. And some of these big factories had thousands of looms in them. And these were running 24 hours a day making fabric, so it's a high output. Pro tip, if you get gum in your hair, freeze it with ice cubes. Yes. You can't do that with cotton, though. Like when you had to rescue your hair from Velcro. Yes. Or muse it. Or muse. Moose. Okay, there we go. Cool, I got you, Brian. You didn't know America had indigo. Yeah. So most of the indigo was being grown in a region called the Piedmont, which is sort of from Virginia down to right about here. What is today, if we draw the borders, Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. South Carolina especially was very big on indigo. You would see some of that in Mississippi and Louisiana after the Revolutionary War, but this region right in here was sort of the indigo part. But Virginia, of course, was much more happy to grow and produce tobacco. They were sort of the colony that figured out how to do tobacco in the first place as a cash crop. But North Carolina and South Carolina and Georgia were big on growing tobacco, and especially these areas right in here were big on growing indigo. Learning all kinds of stuff. I love it. Because it all does relate, right? It all blends together, and we can see how different things in different parts of the world interact with each other. Cotton Eye Joe is about textiles at all. No, it isn't. What's up, Inferno? Good to see you. How's it going? So would it be accurate to describe Edmund Cartwright as a luminary? I'll give you that one. Was Cuba big on tobacco back then? No, most of the big, what we might consider like agricultural plantations in Cuba were growing sugar. The Caribbean was much more of a sugar production area. There was some cotton down there, but I don't want to say Cuba made no tobacco, but I also, if I were on Jeopardy and this was a final Jeopardy question, like this item was the number one export in Cuba during the early 1800s, I would write sugar. So I don't think I ever really linked the exponential growth. Yeah, absolutely. It was purely based around slave labor as well. Let's not eliminate the fact that this entire economic model, including the British side of things, was based on the concept of chattel slavery. Because the only way that the looms in England were spinning and running was because of slavery in the Americas. And this was absolutely something that was known by parliamentary members in the UK and by farmers in America. And everybody knew this junk, right? Everybody knew this. It was absolutely based on slavery. There's no other way of saying it. If you took slavery out of the issue, it completely changed the market. As a way of showing this, one of the biggest groups of people that freaked their lid out when the southern states and the northern states went to war during the Civil War were textile manufacturers in the middle part of Britain, because they were worried about how much this was going to impact cotton production, because they were going to have to shut down their looms. I've literally got newspapers from the 1800s where I can show you, and I should have actually done that today, but it didn't necessarily really fit. We just sort of got onto this topic, where people are panicking in 1866 because it looks like, holy crap, we're not going to get free cheap cotton based on free labor anymore. A get-rich-quick scheme that really works so long as you don't mind being evil. That's how most of them work. Today, we just call it cryptocurrency. So, anyway, let's actually talk about the Luddites and where these people fit into the larger scheme of things. And first off, we have to talk about this person, Ned Ludd. Who? Well, this guy, Ned Ludd. Now, to begin, we don't actually know if this was a real person. There were some... Yeah, he's obviously a giant, right? How dare you affect my bottom line by recognizing African American people as people? Yeah, exactly. Dame Karen, that's exactly the situation that they were in. It doesn't matter that slavery had been outlawed in England at that point by about 30 years. It was still going on in America, and the British economy was still very much wrapped up in American slavery exports at that point. Why only one shoe? I don't know. I also don't know why he's dressed the way that he is. But this is Ned Ludd. And he's holding a big needle because there are two different versions of the story. One is he got very angry at a particular situation and broke all of the spinning needles of the person that he was fighting with. And another version of the story goes that he got very mad and broke the loom of a person that he was arguing with. So it's a big spinning needle. That this would have been like the thing that Sleeping Beauty pricked her finger on to cause her to go to eternal slumber, right? Those were really, really long because that's sort of the functional part of spinning the thread. It has to kind of go around the needle. So anyway, was this a real person? We don't know. Maybe, but we're not sure. But there were a group of people that were mostly former textile workers who had lost their jobs to this automation. And especially, they were very upset with the fact that the government had allowed this to happen. Right? And these particular people had been arguing for decades on how to try to protect workers, how to make sure that people that were in the cottage industry were taken care of after the factory industry destroyed the cottage industry, right? And what they were really mad about wasn't machinery. What they were really mad about is the fact that people were being abused. And they saw this rapid change in textiles as ultimately a dehumanizing process that had eliminated people's livelihoods and basically replaced them with machinery. Now, the machines themselves weren't what they were mad at. Did they go destroy machines? Sure. Did they target factories? Absolutely. But if you look at what a lot of these people were actually arguing for, what they were arguing for was stuff like minimum wage. They wanted to make sure that people that were working in, some of these factories now were getting paid the right way. They wanted to try to protect people that were still trying to make a living in the cottage industry by securing their bottom line profits, right? Like one of the things that they wanted to argue for was minimum pricing, right? Where the lowest price that you could sell this particular thing for, like this bolt of cloth, was X dollars or X cents or shillings or whatever it was, right? They didn't like seeing the abuse that came with the system, and they didn't like seeing people being alienated and hung out to dry. That's what started the Luddite movement. Now, why did they pick the name Luddites? This folk story of this guy smashing a loom just sort of caught on, and even though Ned Ludd was not probably an actual real person, the story of him inspired them, and they said, we're just going to call ourselves the Luddites. And they started referring to Ned as King Ned or even General Ned. And a lot of people started having these sort of secret clandestine meetings where they tried to figure out how to address the grievances of the people to the government, both on a local level and on a national level. Catch up with the chat. UBI, well, that's a whole other discussion. You're really astonished that I've never thought this through, but Luddite is used as an insult for somebody scared of technological advancement. But this technological advancement did inarguably destroy a lot of lives. Exactly, Frank. And that's the thing that, like, we use this term today very badly. Like, if you don't want to upgrade your iPhone 10 to the iPhone 14, somebody's like, you're just a Luddite. But that's, like, the Luddites weren't against progress. They were just against the dehumanizing of people in the goal of progress, right? They wanted people to be taken care of, and they wanted the government to step in to protect people's rights to work and live and operate in a way that was profitable both to themselves and to society as a whole. It wasn't just, they hate technology. That's not what it was. I think it's possible that the picture Shane showed was anti-Luddite propaganda. Yeah, that's quite possible as well. This is why I hate the modern usage of the term Luddite. There we go, Uncle Bill. there we go. Neil before Ned. What's up, Ivan Neo? Good to see you. UBI would probably be a stream topic itself. It's never been done, so it's not history. That would be adventures in economics, and that's not my thing. I mean, I could do it, but I'm not gonna. Silly socialists. Silly socialist. Public services are for kids, right? Some socialists care, but some capitalists care, and we shouldn't necessarily paint everybody that classifies themselves as one big brush, right? There are some socialists that don't care, and there are some capitalists that don't care, and there are some communists that care, and some communists that don't care, right? It's just like, if you don't want AI writing your sitcoms, you are a Luddite. In that situation, maybe so, because if we have AI writing our sitcoms, that's actually going to eliminate jobs from people that are writers, which is actually one of the things that they are striking about right now. So in that particular sense of the term, yes, I agree. That's a great modern parallel, Tuna. Good weaving in, you know. All right, so we've got Ned Ludd. We've got the Luddite concept. What do they actually do, though? Well, there had been anti-industrial activity going on in England for a long time, going all the way back to the early 1700s. And we know this because there were actually bills that targeted stuff like what they called stocking frames. These were looms, right? So there was a Protection of Stocking Frames Act that basically puts you on the track to be transported. So transportation was this penalty where they would send you to a colony, and particularly a penal colony, so somewhere like Georgia in the Americas, or maybe Australia later on. So transportation was a sentence, but later on they're actually going to, but by I'm sorry, let me pause. I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm getting to the interesting part, right? 1721, there were laws against breaking property being used to produce goods, right? So this is stuff like, I'm going to go wreck somebody's forge, or I'm going to go break everybody's spinning wheels or stuff like that, right? The Protection of Stocking Frames Act specifically happened in 1788, so that's a little bit later. This is when they added the penalty of being transported to it. And you could get sent away for like 14 years if you were caught breaking a loom. Because if you look at it this way, if you broke a loom of a weaver, you literally denied them the ability to work, right? And that's a pretty serious crime. So where do the Luddites actually come in? Well, 1811. In 1811, there's the first really big riot of people that is a planned, organized riot where people were arguing for minimum wage, they were arguing for job protection, and as a result, they sort of stormed a couple of buildings and broke some stuff, right? Also, AI will go backwards by reducing diversity, but without us noticing. Quite possibly true. The writers are striking. Recall you once opining that communism doesn't work at a scale. Correct. But do you think that this democracy or capitalism does? More than communism does. Didn't ask our First Nations people if they're happy keeping all those people being punished. No, of course not. I'll be happily redeem the opinion had at the end of the stream. No, I mean, I can answer that right now. And it's not even necessarily my opinion. Communism doesn't work at scale because every time it's been tried at scale, it's failed horrendously. If you look at all of the times where communism has been attempted on a national scale, it doesn't actually get all the way through the process because the people running the phase of the process get stuck in the part where they're supposed to give up power, and then they don't. And that's ultimately one of the flaws of communism as a system. And I'd say this to anybody, and I'm not trying to be rude or anything, but one of the problems that Marx had when he was coming up with a lot of the concepts and formalizing a lot of the concepts, because he didn't create communism, he just sort of popularized it. And a lot of the stuff that goes all the way back to even before Marx, even into like the 1500s, when you get into like the earliest versions of socialist thought, a lot of these people just thought that humans are inherently good, and if you give them the ability to take care of themselves and other people, that they're going to pick the right thing to do more frequently than they're going to pick the wrong thing to do. But the problem is, every time we've seen a communist revolution happen on a big scale, the people that are ultimately supposed to be the ones that do the good thing for the best of the people refuse to do it. And if you look at how communism is supposed to function as a scaled model, it involves people trusting each other that people are going to do the right thing. But ultimately, we don't have the capacity to trust in really, really big numbers on that scale. I mean, I can trust that most people are going to drive on the correct side of the road, but that's something that is going to benefit them just as much as it benefits me. Do I trust that the average person is going to make a financial decision against their own interest and the interest of others? Not at all. And I don't think that's necessarily an opinion. I just think that's sort of the way that humans operate. Now, if you get a group of people that's like 200 people and you go live on a kibbutz in Israel, yeah, there are great examples of how small-scale communism can work and work very well. But that's because those people inside of the community know each other and they can govern each other and function around each other. Does broad-scale democracy and capitalism work better than that? Sure, absolutely. But democracy by itself isn't the opposite of communism. Neither is capitalism the opposite of communism. They're all on a spectrum. And I'll point out, just to be fair here, that the only times of our human history where we've really allowed unrestrained capitalism to function, it was just as dehumanizing and just as friggin' horrible as communism was under Mao, right? If you look at the Gilded Age in America, or the Industrial Revolution of France or Britain or Germany even in the middle 1800s, unrestrained capitalism treats people literally like cogs in the machine. And that is just as dehumanizing and just as horrible. So, you know. I don't think that's anything that's necessarily opinionated. I think that's just the way that it is. You agree with me? 37%. Right. Miss is the opposite of communism. Walterverse, what's up, my friend? Good to see you. Having and not having power changes your options so completely that you are affected. I agree, Frank. And the problem is that we all know that. And in a communist structure, we're supposed to suspend that disbelief, right? We're supposed to believe that everybody is actually working for the betterment of the community overall. But in the back of our heads, we all know that humans are greedy. And I think that's sort of the ultimate kind of failure of the model of communism, is that we just can't trust that much. And then we have crony capitalism. And I'm not trying to say that capitalism is a faultless system. And we don't actually operate under a capitalist structure right now in America. And I'll say this a bajillion times, America is run under what's called a mixed market economy. And we have elements of command economy, which you might see in totalitarian dictatorships. The way that shows up in America is when the EPA says, hey, you can't dump that chemical into the groundwater because you just can't do that. That's literally command economy. And that is the same sort of thing in function as, Mao Zedong or Stalin did in the worst parts of the totalitarian dictatorships of China or Russia. We have socialist elements in America, stuff like Social Security, which is overwhelmingly positive and overwhelmingly supported by the people. Medicare, Medicaid, which has a majority opinion approval on both sides of the political spectrum, right? These are socialist programs. But to a certain extent, minimum wage is a socialist program where we are telling people who own businesses that they have to redistribute their wealth more evenly to the people that work for them. That's socialism. It is. And then we have capitalist elements. So what we have in America is a mixed market economy. And that's the kind of economy that has worked best for people. Did I just say that it works amazingly well and there are no abuses? Of course not. And I think that you all are intelligent enough to not try to throw that back in my face. Right? So there's all of that stuff. All your incentives and values slot into new incentives. Sure. To be fair, my brain would probably deny chemical resources to my liver and kidneys. Well, that's why our brains aren't completely aware, right? We only have parts of our brain that are aware. My wife's grandmother spits on the ground if you mention communism. She's Polish and they had communism so much. DCI Banks, I completely understand where your Polish grandmother-in-law might be coming from, because I suspect that her age would put her living in Eastern Europe under communist rule. And my response to that, if I were to actually sit down with her and talk with her through this situation, I would suspect that she doesn't necessarily hate the concept of communism. She hates the way that Russia ran communism. And there is a significant difference between what Marx said communism should be and the way that Stalin ran. And depending on how old she is, I don't actually know how old your grandmother-in-law is. It might have been Khrushchev or Brezhnev or whomever. None of them were actually Marxists. They were totalitarian communists that hid behind communism as a basically as a regime building tool. That's very much a post-industrial view, though. If we look at thousands of years, our indigenous cultures, they did effectively have communism, and people could trust each other. Look, Dane Karen, I don't know if that's accurate as much as it would like to be. If we look at burials of people in prehistoric times, we still see differences in things like personal possessions. We still see some burials in places that are used by Neolithic people where they are just buried in a bowl or something, or a basket, and you see other people that are buried with a whole ton of personal possessions, including luxury items. So there were the idea that people prior to agricultural sedentary life didn't have social structures or networks is something that's kind of been propped up a lot by unfortunately the Enlightenment, who liked to create this sort of view of ancient humans as somehow more evolved or somehow more perfect. Like this concept of the noble savage, that while they don't have government, they have this egalitarian structure that is treats everybody equally and treats everybody the same, and we're all on sort of the same page. That idea doesn't necessarily hold up through archaeology, and it doesn't necessarily hold up through our encounters with people, especially during the 1700s and 1800s, during the Age of Exploration, when uncontacted peoples were first contacted by Europeans. Like Native Americans. We have all these accounts of people that went over and met Native Americans and then wrote down what they experienced. A lot of these people were jerk faces to each other. We have a lot of the there are these critiques that Native Americans wrote about how we just listen too much, like Europeans. I'm considering myself here a European. Europeans just listen too much to these government people. Like, why do they just do whatever these people tell them to do? Those idiots in government don't know anything about anybody. They're just trying to, be in power and run stuff. And I'm not giving you my cool stuff just because you say so. Like, forget you. I worked and made this. I'm not giving it to you. So this is a very, very complicated concept, and I'm probably not doing the best way of possible to explain it. And I realize also that my initial response was probably a bit too strong, and I wasn't trying to be combative or negative about that. It's just something that it's kind of like one of my areas that I get really excited about talking to, and I can't necessarily spend all the time that I would like to talk about that tonight. There we go. That was a long way around of saying some stuff. Any system will break down when implemented by humans. Sure. Not intelligent enough to do a lot of things. Well, you're more intelligent to do other things than other people too, right? Tonight at 5, blanket statements that don't hold any... Yeah, pretty much. Communism only ended in 89 in Poland or something. Well, again, yeah, what Brittany said, communism, right? It's just kind of communism. You could argue that Jesus was a communist in the Bible. Well, you know... a rich young ruler came up to Jesus and said, hey, you're pretty cool. How can I be one of your followers? And Jesus said, take everything that you own, sell it, and give the proceeds to the poor, and then come and follow me. And the man went away sad because he was very rich. Now, that sounds pretty communist to me. What if AI screenwriting is the great filter? Maybe so. I get what you refer to there, Frank, big time. The thing that keeps us from expanding, right? I apologize for completely derailing the stream. Let's get back to the linen mills. Get on with it. Okay, cool. Jesus was based, right? Wasn't the Iroquois? Yeah. So now we're getting back. Getting pulled backwards. Hey, Moose. Good to see you. Iroquois Confederacy was one of the groups of people that got sort of interviewed by people from Europe. Yes. Is jerkface an academic term? I say it a lot. So I'm an academic, at least I play one in real life. So perhaps. I wonder if communism even could have been a thing back then without capital C capital, like trains and looms, etc. Sure, it could have been. And there were more cooperative efforts towards community building in the pre-agricultural sedentary world. And I think that's what, Dan Karen was getting at. And that I completely agree with. People were much more involved in smaller communities, and they had a recognition that what they did affected other people and could affect another person's survival. And in that way, they were more communally minded, even if their early systems of economy weren't necessarily all held in common. The idea that Native American people didn't have personal possessions, that doesn't really hold up archaeologically. That advice to the ruler is way more extreme than communism, but it's personal advice. Yeah, sure, right. Should specify that when I'm talking about First Nations people, I'm referring to Australian. Oh, okay, so you're over. I know about our Aboriginal stuff, and I've studied Aboriginal life. Well, not necessarily a lot. I would say a fair amount, but I would say even then. There are specifications within Aboriginal life in Australia that would have been something that wouldn't necessarily today be considered a good communist method. Noger says that jerkface is the most academic term. Well, there we go. Okay, now we're caught back up. Wow. And we just got to the part where the Luddites were breaking things in 1811. So let's kind of hit this in a bit of a bullet point list here, because it's now basically time for me to shut up, and we've still got lots. 1812 is kind of the big year for the Luddites, and there's a lot of stuff going on here. They burn a big mill in Lancashire called the West Houghton Mill, 1812. They burn a really big mill in Lancashire, the Burton Mill. This particular issue with the Burton Mill got so large and so out of hand that the government called in the army and deployed somewhere between 12 and 14,000 troops in this middle region where all of this trouble was happening to kind of tamp down on the activity. A lot of a lot of protesters were shot. This is also going to spark the passage of something called the Destruction of Stocking Frames Act, which passes in 1812. And it gives you the death penalty for disrupting a loom. So if you wreck a power loom, or if you go break a water mill, or if you burn down a factory, you can literally get killed for this. Now, the penalty does fluctuate a little bit. It gets moved down to transportation in 1813, but then it gets moved back up to death in 1817. One of the biggest ones that happens in 1812 is at the Cartwright Mill. This is at a place called Huddersfield. And there are a mob of 150 armed men that attack Cartwright Mill. And the people inside of the mill actually barricade themselves in and shoot a couple of the protesters. The government is going to get involved here and investigate and arrest a lot of people. And 14 people that are considered the ringleaders of this particular event are going to be hanged publicly. Also in 1812, there is an assassination of a factory owner, a guy named William Horsfall. The guy that assassinated him, George Mellor, was one of the sort of Luddite ringleaders. He and 4 other guys are going to end up plotting this assassination and kill William Horsfall. One of the plotters ends up turning tail after the government catches them and spares his own life by basically telling everybody else, if you want to do the assassin, you can do the assassin. We haven't done it in a while. The loom produces an awful amount of real wealth. Breaking one wouldn't be petty vandalism. It would be like destroying a bridge. Yeah, it absolutely. This is a lot of production that's being hurt here. But I will point out the irony that what the Luddites were arguing was that these factories, these power looms, had in effect destroyed the looms of the cottage industry, and the government was not willing to step in to protect the cottage industry. But when the Luddites then destroyed the power looms of the wealthy individuals that were running the factories, then the government decided to get involved. That's an important distinction. Because there were just as many people that died from loss of job and job security, right, as there were people who got killed in a Luddite revolt, right? If they destroy the power looms, they lose the fruit of the loom, right? Right? And we can't have anybody running around without shorts on. Just can't have that. This continues as a thing. Another big mill attack at a place called Loughborough, which was in 1816. This is Heathcote and Bowden's mill. 53 looms were destroyed. This is going to end up putting 6 people to the gallows, another 3 sent to transportation. This continues through 1817. One of the big ones was this thing called the Pentridge Rising. This was in Derbyshire. And it was organized by a guy who was a Luddite, but he brought in a lot of other people that sort of had been affected by these government policies that seemed to protect, like Frank said, the sort of the capitalists, but not necessarily the people. And this is going to cause a lot of disruption, and 14 people are going to get sent to transportation. 3 people get hanged for that. But this period from 1811 to 1817 is generally considered sort of the heyday of the Luddites. But that wasn't all. We can go all the way through 1826. In 1826 in Lancashire, there were 3 days of riots called the Power Loom Riots, where over 1,000 looms got destroyed. So the idea does sort of die down by 1817. but it doesn't completely go away. Because again, we have stuff as far as 1826 that can be kind of tied back to the concept that the Luddites were pushing here. Now, I do have sort of the stereotypical image here. We've got a guy with a sledgehammer busting up a loom. We've got people that are breaking up the gears, and this is good old-fashioned Luddite stuff, right? If got that, where's Alanis Morissette when you need her? She's got one hand in her pocket, right? That's no loom. Snazzy dresses for people who hate looms, right? I bet that vest was probably made on a loom, if I had to guess. We can see here on the ground a flying shuttle. Look. That's a flying shuttle. Which were incorporated to the power loom concept, by the way. So. Alright, so that's who the Luddites were. That is why the Luddites were doing what they were doing in the first place. And that's what happened to the Illuminati, right? That's what happened to the Luddites over time. So I hope that this has been interesting because it gave everybody a little bit more of a perspective on what this actual term meant. And hopefully now the Luddites are basically driven into giving up the goals by the government killing them, or they're all sent to Australia, or they're rounded up and hanged publicly. So, right. Illuminati was that movie a while back about people who curve bullets like ping pong. No, that was Wanted with James McAvoy. That's actually based on a comic book that is way better than the movie. It makes way more sense than the movie, and a lot of the silly parts of the movie aren't actually in the comic. So read the comic if you want that story. The looming advance of industrialization. Everybody's getting the good puns in tonight. Everybody brings the puns, right? It was a... Yeah, exactly. Right. What's in the news? I don't know. I get to talk about whatever I want to. I guess the big thing that happened yesterday that I watched, well, not yesterday, it actually happened Sunday, but the news came out yesterday, was that the elections in Turkey are not going as well as anybody really hoped. So the guy that's in charge now, Erdogan, hoped that he could get 50% of the vote and avoid a runoff. He did not. The guy that's his main challenger, Kilic Daroglu, hoped that he would win in the first ballot, and he didn't either. And specifically, it looks like Erdogan has the edge because he ended up with about 49% of the vote, and Kilic Daroglu ended up with about 44% of the vote. Now, they do have to go to a second round of voting to... because there were two other candidates, by the way. I neglected to say that, but they were very small. One of them got about 1% of the vote, and the other one got about 2% of the vote. There were fractions of percentage. It's not like rounded off 44. It's like 44.6 or something like that, right? Anyway, so they're going to have a second round of voting. But there have already been some reports of shenanigans, specifically in the earthquake zone. There was a big earthquake in Turkey several months ago that really disrupted the region. This region is specifically not particularly a stronghold for Erdogan's party in the first place. And it looks like there might be some underreporting of votes that might have been against Erdogan. And we got report today that Erdogan has apparently kicked out some poll watchers that were international. They were international organizations that had sent people to Turkey to observe the polling. And he kicked them out of the country today. So the second round of voting is going to be intense, and Erdogan is really, really freaked out about this, and I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, we could talk about Haiti too. Haiti's in really bad shape, and gangs are running the country, and people are starting to kill the gang members. There's a video about that that DCI Banks posted in the Discord, and I'll refer to that because it actually does a much better job of describing that. Also, fun fact: the McAvoy's butthole coworker was a super young Chris Pratt. Oh, really? I need to go back and watch that again. Maybe I don't. Maybe I'll just Google it. How long was it before any laws were put in to address the Luddite concerns? Never. There were people that were arguing for specific things in Parliament, but the Luddites didn't really get any parliamentary wins. All of the bills that got passed were effectively anti-Luddite instead of addressing the Luddite concerns. England sent their religious Puritans to the U.S. and their technophobes to Australia. They weren't technophobes. Erdogan self-appointed president for life. Well, he does still have to go through the vote, and it will be interesting to see if he allows himself to lose. So, I didn't win. Fair. Time to cheat. Are we going to end up with a new wave of Luddites against AI? I am one. So, I don't trust that people will use AI ethically, and I think that jobs are going to be eliminated, and the people that were in those jobs aren't going to be cared for. And again, they weren't just anti-technology. They were pro-taking care of people who were being replaced by technology. George Meller, the guy that was the assassin that killed William Horsfall, left his body to science. Like he wanted to further the knowledge of humanity. He wasn't anti-progress. He was against treating people like garbage. And I don't think that our current economic model is going to treat people ethically, because it doesn't treat people ethically now. And I don't think that making it easier to treat them unethically is going to make people go, you know what, we should really treat people more ethically. If I'm ever handed tons of political power, you will be able to trust me for about a year. I feel you, Frank, right? The difference may be that we can all have our own loom when it comes to AI. Ivan, I see what you're saying, right? Because everybody kind of has access to this. But I will point out that these AIs are still being run by corporations, right? Like Bard is run by Google, and ChatGPT is run by OpenAI. And at any point that they want to, they could eliminate that from public use. They could license that for corporate use. They could shut that down and be the gatekeepers of that, right? So it's available for everybody now. That does not mean that it will be available for everybody forever. And there are already paid models of a lot of these LLMs that are out there already. So, right. Does he really, though? It feels like when Russia has elections. Well, yeah, no, seriously, Dame Karen. In the last round of elections, Erdogan's party lost several of the really large cities, and they actually did lose the cities. Like Istanbul has, for a long time, been held by the opposing party, but he lost several of the other big cities in Turkey to his opponent's political party, and there was a transition of power in those cities. So he's. I mean, let me be very clear here. He is absolutely a dictator. But he is not a totalitarian dictator. He's still under some oversight. It's a small bit, but there is still some there. Basically, the reason they wanted to learn more about the Luddites was the relation to AI, so this is rather depressing. I'm sorry, Moose, but that's the thing about history, that sometimes it's ugly and sometimes it hurts, and it's still the truth, though. So, isn't Wendy's replacing lots of people with AI for taking orders because AI never forgets to upsell? You know, and it's also never going to need a day off. It's never going to need a bathroom break. It's never going to have an emergency where it needs to leave a shift. It's never going to complain about working all day. That's really what it's about. It's not just about forgetting to upsell. And they might say, oh, this is for upsell. No, it's because it's easier to stick a machine in a person's position because you can treat a machine like a slave where it's illegal to treat a human that way. Yeah, absolutely. About the programming stuff that Dame Karen mentioned. Don't worry, AI companies are already pushing large amounts of bureaucratic oversight and regulation to create a moat to their industry. Yeah, exactly. Exactly what Junk Collector is saying. The other intended part was forecasting where it would go from here, but it feels just like a dead end. They were murdered and jailed. Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah. Google engineer warns it could lose out to open source technology in an AI race, right? It's actually trained largely by South Africans. So we're already outsourcing AI work to places where we can treat people less and pay them less. So we're already showing unethical activity with AI, right? So we're thinking overthrow the machines and start the Spacing Guild and the BGS Resistance. We will make the Kwisatz Haderach. We will find the spice, it must flow. We will destroy the AI and say that no machine should be built in the likeness of a human mind. And we'll have to train mentats. Of course, what that also did was bring back nobility because there's the CHOAM, the Combined Onet Ober Advancement Mercantile System, which is basically the stock market writ global / universal, like literally universal at that point. And ironically, the Mentat school was that's true, because Erasmus, right? Majority of training a GPT style AI is paying a middle class South African contractor $15 an hour turns out to be very effective. Sure. You'll now start looking around for energy ammo before it becomes and save your bottle caps, right, Tad? You come to this channel to get your history 10,000 years in advance. Hey, why not, right? All right. We need to pick a new topic for our next viewer request stream before we go. Let's manage a poll. All right. So our question here. Okay, so here's how we do this. We have viewer request streams, right? This particular one was purchased with 10,000 points, but we alternate. So this one was purchased. The next one we'll do is kind of a free-for-all, a bit of a scrum. So what I'm about to do is make a poll where we're all going to have the ability to vote. So the topic is, what shall we cover next? And what we do to keep it kind of interesting is that we take the number 2 from last time we did a vote, and we sort of bring it over to this one. So what we need now from you all in the stream are 3 suggestions of whatever you think would be cool to talk about in Adventures in History viewer request stream. And we'll take the first 3 that we can work about. Eleanor of Aquitaine is already there. She got brought over as the next one. I know. The VOC, the Dutch East India Corporation. That sounds cool. Good gracious. The Museum Fremen? Yeah, well, that's after we have the God Emperor, though, right? Oh, wow, we've already had people throwing stuff out before I even said throw stuff out. Yeah, okay, so people are just okay. You're jumping the gun, but you're kind of ringing in before the buzzer is active. But I'm going to honor it this time. But in the future, it's going to have to be topics brought up after I say go. So we're going to end up having 5 on the list, but that's okay. Okay. All right, so we're going to start a poll. Doom 2, Doom 3. All right, so here we go. So here's how this works. If you are in the chat, it does not matter if this is your first time or your 1000th time. If you are in the chat, you get to vote. You do not have to be a follower. You do not have to be anybody that's ever spoken in chat. You do not have to be a subscriber. Everybody in chat gets to vote. So your job right now is to look at your chat window and go up to the top of it. There'll be this little down caret like this, and you click on it, and then you get to vote. Everybody gets to vote. So go forth and do your civic duty for the chat. Who are technically not employees, just right. Dusty Cynthia, you'd like to hear something about the history of Western. So we've done Sub-Saharan Africa already, Cliff, as a viewer request stream. Let me look up what specific number that was, and I can tell you. Yeah, we've talked about Ghana, and we've actually done an entire stream on Mali. Let me look that up. Let's see. So viewer request 26 was broadly Sub-Saharan African people. And we talked about Ghana in that one. Let's see. Empire of Mali is viewer request 39. And we've also talked about the Queens of Meroe, who were quite a bit before, but also cool African cultures that don't get covered a lot. That was viewer request 62. So you might want to look at those. It was 27, 39, and 62, Cliff, if you want to get some African stuff. But if there was a specific one, we could absolutely cover that in the future. I don't have a problem doing Africa stuff. I like Africa stuff. No, don't apologize. Absolutely. I mean, this is the 77th viewer request stream, so we've done a few of these, and it's perfectly fine to go, hey, we'd like to do that, and I can go, yeah, we've already got this. You can go watch the VOD, because I keep all the VODs. So if you go to my channel and click on videos and then collections, I have the viewer request streams in a collection, and they are chronologically ordered by number. So you can just sort of scroll through and give those a watch. And if you see some stuff that we didn't talk about, or some stuff that you'd like to talk about deeper, you're welcome to bring it up again. Viewer requests are exactly what they sound like. It's whatever you all want to talk about. Cleopatra. Wow. And we've got a tie. Super. The problem with building a YouTube library with the VODs is that Twitch no longer allows you to directly export videos to YouTube. So you literally have to download them from Twitch and then re-upload them to YouTube, and it takes forever. Forever. All right, so we're going to have to run off. All right, so we're going to do a runoff, and we're going to lower this back down to 2 minutes. So now everybody go vote again. Brittany gets a free episode every year for her birthday that she gets to pick. So if it doesn't work this time, she can just say, hey, do this on my birthday, and she gets a birthday stream. So, oh, so you can send it straight to YouTube. I didn't know that they had changed that back. You still have YouTube export. Okay, so I might have completely screwed it up, and I don't know how to do it then. So maybe I need to go back and look at it. Everybody's exporting to YouTube, so I know that when I first looked at it, you couldn't do it. They were in an argument with each other. So I just stopped trying because I was up doing it one at a time. But if I can export them all to YouTube, that's a different story. If I don't have to sit here and literally... okay, we're not going to do the tie thing again. So everybody go vote. Everybody go vote. There were more people in the last poll than there are people that have voted on this poll. The problem with that, Uncle Bill, is, and this is absolutely a definite problem, I don't have enough hard drive space. I would need a lot of hard drive space for that. All right, so we got 2 more people to vote, and people voted to make a tie. Okay, now we're tie broken. Everybody can still go vote, but just make sure that. Oh, we had a swing, and now we're tied again. All right. Which one got to 10 first? USSR got to 10 first. I don't even have a coin around me. Let's do... All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go over here to the Google, and we're going to do a random number generator. Okay, so here's the rules. If the number is an even number, so 0, 2, 4, 6, we're going to do Dutch East India. If it is an odd number, we will do USSR collapse. All right, so it's an odd number. There we go. We got 5. So there we go. 5 is our number, and we will do collapse of the USSR. There we go. We could do just ranked voting. But if you voted for Dutch East India Company, don't fret, because it will show up on the next viewer request poll. When we do another poll, it will come back over, so it's not gone yet. And because that's what my wife wanted, it might just show up in June because that's what my wife wants to make happen, right? And yes, that's obvious nepotism, but just to be honest, I like my wife more than I like all of you. Not that I don't like all of you, it's just I like my wife more. And it's okay, because I can say that and get away with it, right? For now. I don't think that's going to change. You're slightly offended by that? You know. All right. Where are we going to go do the raid? Oh, I see where we're going to go do the raid. Is the raid actually... Nope, the raid has not... The chat has not actually started yet. So we're going to hang around here for just a little bit. Because one of our buddies is about to start streaming. You should just request the history of divorce. Oh, that's horrible. That's horrible. You all. Another what's in the news. What should we talk about? Do you have anything particular, Moose, or you just want me to... Anything new in Ukraine? Yes, there's always something new in Ukraine. Okay, so last night, Russia sent a ton of missiles at Kiev, and Russia claimed to have destroyed one of the Patriot missile emplacements that the U.S. sent to Ukraine. Ukraine is denying this. But what Russia is not denying is that Ukraine was able to shoot down some of their hypersonic missiles. So Russia, back last year, before even the Ukrainian conflict began, was touting this hypersonic missile that was going to be unshoot downable because it was just moving too fast. Well, it turns out that they shot 6 of those uninterceptable hypersonic missiles, right? They shot 6 of those at Ukraine last night, and Ukraine shot 6 of them down. Now, Ukraine claimed that they had shot down 2 of those a couple of weeks ago, but there wasn't really a lot of necessarily solid evidence for that. But it's pretty clear that they're actively shooting down these uninterceptable hypersonic missiles. And of course, Russia is like, no, you didn't. You can't say that. But it's pretty clearly happening. So Russia's new big fancy unkillable missile, it's getting shot down. And it's pretty clearly being shot down by Patriot missile systems. So, you know, that's a positive, because there was actually some ability to kind of worry about that, right? Like, it's actually kind of scary to shoot a missile that's going to be faster than the speed of sound, right? The ability of a Patriot missile system to lock onto that missile, project a trajectory for that, and then intercept it is potentially limited by the speed of the missile incoming, right? So the fact that we were able to watch this happen and have some good proof, it makes a lot of people feel better. All right, so this is the standard book of questions. As always, we've just got a random question, and we'll see what we come up with. Let's go you. What is this? Where is Palestine? Palestine is in the Middle East. I should remind everybody, this book is over 100 years old. So it was published in 1917. To which empire does it belong now? That would be the Ottoman Empire at the time. Now it's part of Israel, right? Describe Jerusalem. It's a big, important city to 3 really big monotheistic religions, and it is still a bone of contention between the Palestinians and the Jewish inhabitants of the region today. So, there we go. Russia's best tech was designed and built by the Ukrainians during the Soviet era. Well, you know, the Khrushchev period of time where he was really encouraging Ukrainians to get into the military and have sort of a Ukrainian flavor absolutely did produce a lot of advances for the Soviet Union. Of course, Brezhnev then came in and pooped on all of that and said no. I don't think that word means what you think it means, right? Keep in mind that the U.S. publicly demonstrated hypersonic missiles in 2010. Sure, but we weren't going to be shooting those at ourselves. The fact that Russia had them, that's the potential for problematic issues there. All right, so let's go hit a raid. We're going to go raid our buddy Aristotle, because I love this guy, and he's a good streamer. So we're going to go raid Eris, and our battle cry, as always, is adventure. And when you get there, you can share all of our lovely and wonderful emotes. Thank you all so much for hanging out. We've got a really big crowd tonight. Viewer request streams do tend to pull bigger crowds sometimes, because I think people sometimes are more interested in the stuff that they come up with than the stuff that I want to talk about. And that's probably because I talk about weird stuff that people don't necessarily have context for in the first place. But that's okay. I appreciate that. And I'm glad that everybody was really involved. We had some really good conversation tonight. We'll be back around Thursday, and we'll talk about China, and we'll talk about the collapse of the Tang Dynasty and the rise of arguably my favorite dynasty of China, which is the Song Dynasty. But until then, everybody, have a good one. Take care of yourselves. And your homework is to do something nice for somebody and not tell them that you did it. So that's your homework. But until then, take it easy.